Due to the nature of the manga industry, many good manga go under the radar, especially here in the West. One of these manga is Wizard and Red Pilgrim, which takes place in a world where wizards, who are fueled by human blood, play a major role in the social dynamics of society. The story follows a girl named Benny, who is cursed with immortality. Because of this, she is treated poorly by those around her, who take advantage of her immortality for immoral reasons. This changes one day when Benny encounters a faceless wizard named Hawkwood, whose only defining feature is his mouth. This is because being a wizard is like a punishment or curse for some people. In Hawkwood's case, no matter how much he eats, he will never be full. Benny and Hawkwood can relate to each other in how they are both cursed. Thus, they become friends. One might assume that this story is one of those where an unqualified adult takes care of a mysterious child, a la a girl from the other side. But the story subverts that concept. Both Benny and Hawkwood have had rough lives, and instead of one taking care of another, they look out for each other in their own unique ways. The world they live in is a dark and cruel one, which is accentuated by the medieval and gothic type settings. As the duo travel together, they encounter other wizards and magicians. Not only do those they encounter pose interesting moral questions and commentary, but their stories are entertaining, and their designs are beautiful. Speaking of the art, the overall aesthetic of this manga is very unique. While many manga strive to be as polished and clean looking as possible, the mangaka, Shida, takes a more gritty approach. As you've seen, it looks like the manga was created with hurried ink pen sketches, which adds to the depressing atmosphere the story thrives on. Not many artists consider the perceived medium of their work, and I feel like Shida should be praised for this decision. I know some people may believe that the style is a crutch for Shida, but when they want to turn things up, they go all out. Similarly, you can see their other work on their social media, and they are more than capable of working in other styles. As I said before, this manga is very unique. The art is solid, the story is compelling, and the character designs, especially those of the other wizards, are stellar. Learning about the world and how magic and being a wizard impacts people is very fun. Shida also makes sure to show a balance of good and evil in the world. For instance, one encounter may be about an evil magician who hurts humans, while another encounter may detail how humans have harmed magicians. The really only bad thing about this manga is the ending. I'm not sure as to why this manga ended, but it felt like a lot of things were rushed, unexplored, and unfinished. I believe that this is a result of the manga being axed. Again, I couldn't find an explanation for this, but this theory makes the most sense. A lot of the time, publications cut off more avant-garde manga before they could really get going. This is because publishers are afraid to take risks, because it could hurt them financially. Like, there's a reason why there are so many copy and paste isekai stories. The publishing company that Wizard and Red Pilgrim was associated with is a mostly small, unknown company, so they probably got scared when taking a risk on Shida and axed it. That is just my theory though. Some elements may disprove this theory, such as how the manga was nominated for a pretty prestigious award, as well as how it's the third most popular manga from that publishing company. Maybe Shida just got burned out or overwhelmed, as this manga was their first manga. At the end of the day, I do not know, and I can only theorize. Overall, it is still a good manga, and you should really check it out. The next manga is about a historical war, the 100 Years' War. This war was fought between England and France during the 13 and 1400s. The manga, Hawkwood, focuses on John Hawkwood, an English mercenary leader. While he served in several battles and wars, the manga focuses only on his exploits during the 100 Years' War. As this is a manga, some of the historical events are exaggerated and altered, but that's a pretty valid trade-off, as you lose a bit of realism for the sake of a more entertaining read. While the story is compelling, and it is a solid medieval manga, what stood out to me the most about this manga was the art. Things like the armor and horses are done very well, and all the weapons are stylized and look super clean. There isn't too much to say about this manga though. The art and paneling are good, the story is fun and tight, and the characters are pretty interesting. Pretty much, if you just like medieval manga or maybe history, you should check out Hawkwood. The manga The Wolf Never Sleeps features an adventurer named Lekin. While Lekin was exploring, he found a mysterious black hole, and being the adventurer that he is, he jumped in. This hole took him to another world, one that is very similar to his own. Because of this, Lekin is able to use his abilities from the previous world, but ultimately, the story is not a power fantasy. The story is more about how Lekin learns from the world and impacts those he meets. While a lot of fantasy stories focus on the protagonist's desire for strength, Lekin's only desires are to learn and help others. Unlike a lot of other isekai protagonists, Lekin is experienced and mature, which makes him more compelling to older readers. Anyways, a good example of Lekin's desire to learn occurs when he meets other people. After helping them defeat some monsters, Lekin tries to communicate with them, only to find out that they speak different languages. Despite this barrier, he joins them in order to learn how to communicate with others in the new world, as well as gather more information about the world. It is once Lekin gains a foothold in the world where the story really begins to pick up though. Despite this, Lekin is always learning, growing, and helping others, which is what makes this story so appealing to me. Oftentimes, isekai protagonists are motivated by selfish desires, longing for power, or more perverted things. The Wolf Never Sleeps relies on more classic, noble traits in order to make Lekken interesting, which is what makes this manga stand out in a sea of isekai stories. Another way this manga stands out is the art. Lekken's design is very dark and a bit intimidating, which makes him really contrast the new world setting, which is rather bright. This contrast makes it feel like Lekken is a foreigner. A lot of isekai stories have their protagonist designed to fit right in with the new world, and while depending on the story, this isn't always a bad thing. Oftentimes it takes away the point of the story being an isekai. Sometimes it feels like it's just a fantasy dude in a fantasy world, as opposed to a foreigner in a fantasy world. Since The Wolf Never Sleeps makes sure to let you know that Lekken is out of his element and trying to fit in, while also maintaining his sense of self from the original world, it makes a lot of sense that he is designed to stand out. Overall, this manga is pretty good, having long chapters as well. The art and paneling are well done, and the story is written by Shinbis, who has a solid track record of writing good stories. Despite these factors, the manga was presumably axed after 15 chapters. Like I said earlier, a lot of more avant-garde or creative, unique works get axed because publishing companies don't want to take a risk. I think the situation may be similar to the one previously discussed. Regardless, it is still worth checking out, and if you really enjoy the story, you can read the light novel, which is still ongoing. In Vanilla Spider, a giant spider web covered an entire city. At first, people panicked and speculated what the spider web was, but as time went on and nothing happened, people stopped paying attention to the web, and it became part of daily life. Nobody notices Tsusuji Amedomi, not in a loser way, he just doesn't have presence. Because of this, his peers call him the ninja. Amedomi takes advantage of his ability by following his crush home from school in order to make sure she gets home safe. I know this sounds super creepy, but Amedomi isn't that kind of guy. One day while following his crush home, Amedomi stops in front of an abandoned store for a drink. There, he witnesses a spider monster eating a dude. This wasn't the first time Amedomi has seen something like this. For some reason, it seems like only Amedomi notices these monsters. As Amedomi returns home, he bumped into a strange man who hit him on the head with a crowbar. When he came to, the man explained to him the origin of these monsters, who are called elevators, and told Amedomi that if he wants to protect his loved ones, he has to go around and destroy these monsters with a pipe. The following day, Amedomi witnesses an elevator eat one of his classmates. Realizing that an elevator has infiltrated the school, Amedomi quickly takes action and slices it up with his faucet. After that, he dedicates himself to slaying elevators. There's a lot more to this story than just some dude fighting monsters. You've got aliens that wear people's skin, mutated elevators, and an even bigger threat that might even destroy the entire city. The story also delves into Amedomi's relationships with his family and friends, and how the conflict with the elevators affects these relationships. In a lot of popular shonens, there are large groups of people who fight against another evil group. Like in Demon Slayer, you have the Demon Corps versus the Demon King Muzan and his Legion of Demons. You usually have a trio as well, where it's a main guy and two other people. There are other notable shonen tropes, but I think what makes Vanilla Spider stand out is how it doesn't really follow these tropes. I'm not saying that these tropes are a bad thing, and I think they can be highly effective and well executed. I'm just saying that because Vanilla Spider doesn't take this path, it stands out. For instance, for the first third of the manga, it seems like Amedomi is the only guy fighting elevators, and when you realize he isn't alone, he doesn't team up or compete with anybody. He sticks to his principles and what he does best, and because of that, the story becomes more intense as it progresses. And when Amedomi does have to work with others, they usually have different skills than he does, which keeps things fresh and intriguing. In the same vein, Amedomi doesn't just go from monster to monster like it's nothing. In each battle, he has to do something more than just fight. He's got to solve a mystery, deal with the consequences of fighting monsters every day, and understand his family's past. I'd also like to mention that the ending is pretty wild, and because a story isn't afraid to end its characters' lives, you don't really know what's gonna happen next. Vanilla Spider isn't really a deep story, it doesn't have any powerful themes or messages like that. It's just a really fun manga about a dude who fight monsters. I'm also a big fan of the manga's art. It seems rough and surreal, while maintaining a certain level of polish. The mangaka also made really good use of conveying the dark tone of the story through lighting and texture. The mangaka almost always uses black, white, and one shade of gray. They shade by hatching, which gives the manga its unique look. Its paneling is very geometric, but with how panels are placed, it feels a lot more dynamic than it actually is. Although the story and characters are strong, I believe the manga succeeds best with its visuals. If you made it this far, I think you should read a chapter or two of this manga to see if it's for you. It's hard to recommend because of its unorthodox approach to the battle shonen genre, but personally I thought it was a fun read, and I hope you guys feel the same. The next manga is more for the josei enthusiasts who are out there, but this manga could be enjoyed by seinen fans as well. March Story was created by Kyung-gil Yang and Hyung-min Kim, two Korean mangakas that moved to Japan following the events in the late 90s. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, you should totally watch my video on old school manhwa. Anyways, the story takes place in the 18th century in Europe, where monsters called the Ill hide in artworks and possess artists, making them do horrible things. The story follows a girl named March, who fights and exercises monsters with her comrades. Although the story sounds like the average shonen, it takes a much more introspective look at the consequences of violence and fighting through a feminine lens. The story is a gothic fantasy, meaning that it's very dark and edgy, and definitely not for the younger readers. March's story has two main storytelling methods. There's an overarching story about March's past, as well as episodic battles with the ill. These battles are pretty entertaining. I'm sure that people who are more interested in seinen manga will appreciate these. There's also a pretty good amount of romance, and will they won't they moments, as well as romantic conflicts, which josei readers might quite enjoy. If you like cool action with wholesome romance, then you'll probably like March's story. Be warned, there is quite a lot of edge though. Another factor that makes this manga great is the art. It takes a lot of elements of the older Korean style, as well as traits from mid-2000s manga. This results in a pretty unique style, and combined with the gothic aesthetic, this manga has a really inspired atmosphere that you just don't see anymore. I hope I didn't come off as too dorky or pretentious in this video. Thank you for all of your recent support on the previous video. Your comments really encourage me to keep making these videos, and I don't think you guys realize just how much your words mean to me. Thank you all for everything. Later, gamers.